China has not won. The Cold War with the democratic world has just begun. To those who once asked and answered if China has won, only to answer in the affirmative, yes it has. As seen in the works of Kishore Mahbubani, or perhaps even Ian Bremmer, president of Eurasia Group, whose company creed is politics first. Neither of them seem to have taken into account the gravity of other critical factors. Perhaps no, it hasn't. Now why is this the time to argue to the contrary that China may now be witnessing some resistance to its rise? Their reasons are varied and plenty, therefore, it is important to mention some of them, the most important ones first. To be sure, China is determined to make its citizens, perhaps the whole world who takes an interest in China's future evolution, behave according to what Beijing insists must be their absolute normal. The latter involves the prevention of what the late Minister Mantor Lee Kuan Yew of Singapore, who was an avid observer of modern China, called sheer chaos. Even more importantly, Chinese Communist Party will celebrate its centennial in 2021. President of China, in particular, does not want China to look at the abyss of any form of social or political collapse. Whether it is triggered by a zoonotic disease like SARS-CoV-2 that causes COVID-19, or the prolonged protests in Hong Kong last year. These are factors and political actors that are supremely important in deciding whether China can rise to the top and stay there without any resistance from the democratic world, notwithstanding the flaws of the latter too. Why are there some flaws in latter? For what it is worth, the US and most of the countries in European Union and Latin America continue to struggle with wave after wave of the pandemic, which can potentially become endemic if a vaccine is not found in the nearest future. Thus, when the democratic world feels that it is losing its grip on the pandemic and its position at the top, it is natural they will question the credentials of China. And, by the same token, check its further advances, whether by banning Huawei or its popular apps such as TikTok and WeChat. Invariably, the world might witness a long Cold War that can become hot in some places. These are places where the large spectrum of national interest of China and the democratic world do clash directly. Take Hong Kong, for instance. China did not anticipate that the world would push back or side with the unruly protesters in Hong Kong, some of whom did engage in acts of violence against Hong Kong police and civilians, when China passed the National Security Law. The strict National Security Law was passed at 11 p.m. on June the 30th, just 1 hour prior to the 23rd anniversary of the handover of Hong Kong to China.
China's new national security law for Hong Kong has been greeted with protests in the territory and condemnation from the international community. The legislation passed yesterday gives Beijing powers to shape life in Hong Kong as never before.
To be sure, Hong Kong was given back to China by the United Kingdom on July 1, 1997. However, due to China's strict national security law, which can indict anyone who opposes China with the goal to render it chaotic in the eye of the Chinese authorities, Beijing has begun to see parts of the world challenging China's legal stance, since the law puts the citizens of many countries who visit Hong Kong in legal jeopardy of extrajudicial detention too. But China cannot rise smoothly and predictably too, due to its increasingly odd weather patterns that have triggered drought and floods of varying intensities across the country. Indeed, in the southwestern part of China, not excluding Wuhan too, floods have become China's top headache in 2020. More recently, China has had to struggle with the possibility of a G4 swine flu virus becoming the next pandemic. The Chinese embassy in Kazakhstan has also warned of another deadly pneumonia springing up in the neighboring state. Be that as it may, Kazakhstan has denied the severity of the disease. Yet, Almaty, the capital of Kazakhstan, is a critical ally of China. It is one of the key points of the Belt and Road Initiative of China too. The fact of the matter is, in a world still wobbling from coronavirus and increasingly climate change, the trajectory of China's economic growth would just be as uncertain as the world's own globalization. This is due to the internexus of China and globalization. Why is this the case? For what is worth, China needs the world to export its goods and services, while potentially, China also needs other goods and services of the world. No matter how large is the Great Bay Area in southern China, Beijing still needs Hong Kong as a key financial center. Beijing cannot scare away anyone from Hong Kong or the mainland through detention, as and when the relationship of China and the United States were to go sour any further, or, for that matter, with Canada and Australia. Be that as it may, when anyone criticizes China in the social media, he or she is now at risk of running afoul of the national security law too. Real or fictive, it remains a fear factor that could be hyped up by the media, since there were already 2 Canadians that were indeed arrested when the daughter of the founder of Huawei was detained in 2019. The daughter will now be facing trial to be extradited to the United States. Australia, fearing the worst, has issued a travel warning to their own citizens to China too. As these issues are taking place, the United States has described the keen rivalry with China as a marathon, something not likely to thaw easily, even if there is a new American president in November 2020 or 2024. Sensing the increased geopolitical tempo and risks of the Indo-Pacific region, reputable academics such as Professor He Kai has urged China to reflect on its foreign policy, since China does indeed need the world, and vice versa. The latter to ensure a peaceful concert of powers where China can be a responsible stakeholder. Elsewhere, China has to contend with its high national debts, just as other great powers have to face the same. Thus, it is not easy for anyone, whether the person being a scholar or strategic thinker, to speak of a unilinear rise of China. China's historical dynamics, as Professor Wang Gungwu at the East Asia Institute in Singapore likes to point out in all his works, is cyclical, if not supremely complex, in nature. As the first opening phrase of the Romance of the Three Kingdoms acclaimed, "What may unite under the heaven may divide. What may divide under the heaven may unite." China is constantly aware of its own instability, which increases its incentive at the top of the Chinese Communist Party to stabilize it, often by all means necessary. Thus, there is a long way to go in order for China to be permanently lodged as number 1 at the peak of the world of global politics. Even the United States and the West, after more than 500 years of dominion, have begun to understand the power of the pandemic. They are slowly but surely beginning to understand that Mother Nature is the ultimate terrorist, as one of their scientists put it. The West, or China, indeed any state, must become a well-prepared biosecurity state to withstand the full power of the virus, with many more waves of different viruses to come too. Yet, the basic journey for China or anyone who wants to race to the top rests on working with others, as Foreign Minister Wang Yi himself has conceded. The US policy towards China's expensive claims of South China Sea has often been neutral, even though Washington recently sent warships to strategic waterway. It is now for the first time waiting explicitly on the side of multiple Southeast Asian countries.